So I think that's what I've been trying to do. This conversation, I think 2 episodes back, lovely gentleman, his wife was diagnosed with early onset, but unfortunately the progression was so rapid. So she's currently in a care home. And just hearing that side of him sharing a story of what he's experienced as a husband was very interesting. And a lot of people reached out to me and to him because it's a story that resonated with many. And they were like, oh, we don't talk enough about how men actually navigate these care systems. So that was interesting.
Evan reminds me that we don't talk about younger onset. We don't talk about the fact that there are people who progress very, very fast, and there are people who progress very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, doctors want to say it's only one way, and it's not. It's not black and white. There's gray sides to it. And those are the conversations we need to have. We need to make people aware that it comes in many different sizes. And the goal here is not to say one is better or worse than the other, to say, how can we live our best with what we have for as long as we have, whatever that length of time is. So
yeah, and it was like the short clips that I cut out from that episode had over 1,000 views.
Beautiful.
It was like, nice.
Beautiful. And that's, if you do that consistently, I mean, literally you're putting out clips every week or so, every few days, then the people get familiar with you and they'll start coming back to you and they'll start saying, I want to know more. Then you set up the subscription membership and you can actually create an income off of that. That is a side job to pay for the equipment. And that's also beneficial because then you'll get people who say, I'm willing to pay you $5 a month to just listen to the things you have to say. To get the full stories and the backgrounds that you don't share with everyone else.
Yeah.
So,
and also like the background idea of this was also that when I go back home after the fellowship, I want to collect like different stories from different parts of Zambia where people have been intensely stigmatized and just put them out there so that it just starts a conversation. Because I know getting a research study funded is very difficult, but if I just created stories, I think a lot of people would be interested in just sharing their stories.
Now, is Zambia?
Yeah.
Is Zambia, how technology friendly is Zambia?
I think almost everyone has got a cell phone, a smartphone. So.
And how bad is the stigma?
It's bad. It's attributed to witchcraft.
So you're in one of the African countries that witchcraft is a key cause.
Yeah.
Which means that you need to convince people that
it's not.
Not only that it's not, but that you have to convince people to come onto your show, speak visually, let people see them, and trust you enough that they're not going to get hurt, not going to be criticized by their neighbors because they've been seen. So you've got an extra duty on your hands. That's going to be hard.
I have to do it, and I have to do. Anyway, we'll start off by welcoming you to the podcast. we should have already begun, but some of the parts that we've already talked about, I'll clip them out.
Okay.
I think Eben would love to hear feedback on his podcast. Yeah. So, Brother John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Grant.
So I'll start with your name. So it's Brother John Pagan.
Actually, it's
Pagan.
That's right. It's Brother John Richard Pagan, hyphenated first name. I'm a brother through a monastic community in the Episcopal Church in the U.S. So.
I didn't know. So in my head, I was thinking, he just loves the word brother. So I was like, oh, that's the Brother John.
And I've had lots of different people think different things. I've even had people change it to father, and I'm like, no,
that's
I'm
too
not
much.
ordained. It's about me wanting to live a good life, but also wanting to be of service to others in the real world. I don't want to be greater than in order to do that. And priests tend to have a position that they have to uphold, and their names haven't been so good in the public.
So you grew up you were born and raised in the United States.
I was born and raised in the United States. I was born in Manhattan, New York City, and military family. So we've been everywhere. We've been from East Coast to West Coast and Texas in between.
Did you hear have to wear one of those cowboy hats.
No cowboy hats, but I am 60s, 70s babies. So I wore 70s clothes when I was a little kid and had a big afro when I was in high school. And
I wouldn't imagine you don't know, bro.
Yeah.
You should show
Nice
me
big
one of the
afro.
pictures if you have. So you did your education, I'm assuming, in the States.
I went to high school in California and in Virginia, finished in Virginia, joined the Navy, was in the Navy for 18 months before I was dismissed because of some policies that they had at the time that weren't very friendly. I then became a travel agent. Then from a travel agent was hired by the software writers who did the software for travel agents, who was owned by Continental Airlines. Then worked for Continental Airlines on their background software. Joined technology and did technology for 10 years. Got my bachelor's in computer science.
That's a lot.
The day I got my bachelor's in computer science, I quit technology and opened a coffee shop.
Oh, nice. You lived the dream, and you're still living the dream.
And that might be where I get my attitude from. After the coffee shops did extremely well for 4 years, and then hit the financial time that in 2008 in the US, which was really bad. But I realized during that time I loved working with people. So I went back to school, got my master's in clinical psychology, became a psychotherapist, marriage and family therapist, and then decided I really liked it and went back to earn my doctorate in clinical psychology. But that's when my cognitive changes started to occur, and I was dismissed from my program at that time.
Okay, so that's an interesting turn of events. But I want to take you back when you were dismissed at school. Was it because you were gay?
When I was dismissed from the Navy.
Yeah, from the Navy.
Yes, that was because I was gay.
Okay.
Wasn't sure that's an okay word to be mentioning here, but yes, it was because I'm gay. And I really was still uncertain at the time, but the very possibility was enough in the early 80s to get you dismissed. And so they gave me an honorable discharge because my father was an officer in the same field as I was.
Was he still working that time?
Was that?
Was he still working?
Yes, he was working at the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery in DC, and I was a corpsman, a medic in California, in San Diego. And so to make sure they didn't upset him, they gave me an honorable discharge. But they gave me an honorable discharge with the inability to re-enlist.
So how did you, in that moment, well, you were unsure. How did you take it? How did you process it?
I didn't. At the time, I had to tell my father and mother what was going on. That was a conversation I was not prepared for. When I told my father why I was getting out, I was told that if I got out under a homosexual discharge, I was not to come back home, that he wanted nothing to do with me, that I was ruining his career.
That's interesting.
It was a difficult time. I spent the next 5 months thinking that my parents didn't want anything to do with me. In that 5 months, I got into really bad drugs, lived on the streets for a couple of months, was in a really ugly place.
So I'm trying to process all that. So
this is a lot to process.
Yeah.
You're learning more about me than Fernando knows.
Well, that's something I'll brag when I see him. I'm like, I know, Brother John, you don't. If you want to know him, watch the podcast. Yeah. So because anyway, I'll rush back to the future because now you moved back with your parents after.
I said I would never go back home, and I stayed in California for 30 years. After my mild cognitive impairment was diagnosed and they realized that it wasn't getting any better, the neurologist in California recommended that I live closer to my family. So I took a deep breath and decided that I needed somebody to support. And so I moved back home with my parents. We had long since healed that situation. Parents barely remember it, but I still sat with it, and it was a hard thing to do, come back home.
So you don't have other siblings, I'm assuming?
I have a brother and a sister.
Okay. Because I think if it happened to me, I think I would rush to my siblings first.
My brother My brother struggles with the fact that I'm gay. Since my diagnosis, he's become much more caring and supportive, but still, it was even awkward for him to meet my ex at one time. My sister, she'll act in some ways like she accepts me. Then she makes a lot of comments to say that she doesn't accept it. It took me a long time to explain to her that I'm not her sister. But she would introduce me as her sister to other people. And I'm like, no, I'm a guy, and I know I'm a guy. And that was challenging. When I painted my nails, she rolled her eyes and got disgusted. So my siblings aren't very supportive.
Yeah, that's a difficult place to start. When you became a brother, you started your own coffee shop. Then was it like a few years later? Then you got cognitive impairment diagnosis.
Actually, I became a brother after my diagnosis.
Okay.
About a year later, 2 years later. I had the coffee shop first. I got my master's second as a clinical psychotherapist. And it was during my doctorate to go further in the clinical psychology that I started to notice that my grade point average was dropping. In the US, 4 is the highest you can go. I had a 3.74.
Did you assess yourself?
Was that?
Did you assess yourself, or was it like when you noticed us? Did you like, oh,
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I knew something was wrong. So yes, in some ways, I was already thinking about what were the symptoms, what was the problems, and everything. And I went to my dean and my advisor, and they decided that it was just all depression and anxiety, and I needed a therapist. And I said, it's not that, and I'm going to find somebody who can help me I went to the military's VA system, veterans system, the only free medical service that I can get, and had a nurse practitioner, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, do assessments on me. He at first thought it was ADHD, which I had no history of, ADHD being attention deficit and hyperactive disorder. The fact that I had no history of it was puzzling him. So he sent me to a neurologist. The neurologist did full slate of assessments. And that's when they decided that initially they decided I had a language disorder, that I was misinterpreting language, which is really indicative of what I have as a dementia. But after careful look, the neurologist decided that I had a mild cognitive impairment. He hoped that it would be due to a fall I had had months before. And he was like, well, let's see if it heals. And so we waited 6 months. And that's when he said, it's not healing, it's getting worse.
So in between that, waiting for the 6 months for him to get back to you, what sort of care support did you have?
I had absolutely no care support. When I got the mild cognitive impairment, I went to my school. I informed them that it was a mild cognitive impairment. They dismissed me from my program and said I wasn't taking my program seriously enough. I went and tried to fight that with the Equal Opportunity Commission and lost. They're actually really there to protect the school.
Oh, wow.
And so I became very depressed. I lost my car. It was repossessed because I lost all my grants. I lost all my funding. I lost the job that the school had given me. Everything fell apart.
And like what time frame was that happening? Like, was it?
That was actually happening during the 6 months that I was waiting for to see where the mild cognitive impairment would do, if it would get better or not. Fortunately, I was barely making enough through VA disability to pay for my apartment. So I was keeping that. One of my neighbors downstairs, she had been bringing up bags of groceries to me. And
so kind.
Every once in a while, she would meet me in the garage and she'd hand me some cash and say, this is for you.
Oh.
That was my support.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was unexpected. And these are the
You may
miracles.
never know where you get help from.
Exactly.
Even when you're in an ugly space, there's that one person that come out of nowhere. Then you're like, oh, angels exist.
And that's it. Angels came out of nowhere. My brother, even, who again has a difficult time accepting that I'm gay, he drove all the way out from Texas and surprised me because my car had been repossessed. He had in the back of his truck a scooter, and he got me registered and got me a scooter to get around.
No, that was so thoughtful.
Yeah. So there were the little things that kept popping around
Yeah.
until the doctor said that I should be closer to home.
So after you moved back with your parents, how was the situation like now that you had already received feedback from the neurologist? And did you receive like any support afterwards?
The veteran services in the U.S. is very funny. You would think they were all the medical clinics were connected. They're not. They didn't have copies of my records from California to Richmond, Virginia. I had to provide them CDs of copies of records and all. I had to go to a primary care doctor and start all over again to request a neurologist. She asked me why did I need a neurologist? I said, I have this diagnosis. And she says, well, we need to be able to show that there's been evidence of it. So we went through all kinds of trying to push for that until they finally got me a neurologist in the local area. I got a neurologist in 2015. At the same time, then 2016, before that neurologist could finish working with me, my heart stopped twice. I had been complaining for a couple of years. I was zoning out and spacing out and going through these cold sweats and all. And what I didn't know was that the cold sweats and zoning out were all having to do with my heart. And so they finally, after I complained enough, they put a monitor on me. And overnight, in the first very night that I was wearing it, they called up the house and called and called and called. I had zoned out. When I woke up from it, I pick up the phone and she says, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm just tired. I'm going back to bed now. And she says, no, don't fall asleep. She goes,
Well, no.
We've got an ambulance on the way. Your heart has stopped twice and we don't want you to go to sleep. And that's when they learned that I had an autonomic dysfunction. So the neurologist had that information, or the cardiologist actually said, my brain's forgot to tell my heart to beat.
Oh, wow.
The neurologist then did several tests, redid the psych assessments because he didn't. Neurologists don't trust the other neurologists. They have to redo everything.
No. A second opinion. We'll start afresh.
So I went through the process, and that's when, as I said this morning's speech, that I found myself standing in a clinic office at my little clinic that was in my community on a telehealth call with the neurologist at Richmond. And he told me while I stood there in a white room with nobody else in it, he said, we think you have a neurodegenerative disease. And I'm standing there thinking, are you talking dementia? And he says, yes. And then he said, let's get together in 3 months and talk further about it. And he hung up the phone and he left me standing there.
Oh, wow.
In an empty room. And December 16th,
Shocked.
2016.
You don't know what to do.
Yes.
Like, what just happened?
What's just happened?
Am I dreaming?
I mean, just months prior, I'd had a pacemaker put in. And then thought I was driving home that day to my place. And because I wasn't living with my parents, I was actually living in one of their townhouses nearby. And instead of going to my place, I went directly to my parents' house, kind of on autopilot, and walked into their kitchen. And my mother was standing there, and I told her to sit down. And I fought to find the words to tell her that I had dementia. She asked if it could be fixed. It hadn't quite registered in her head either.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm dying. There's no fix. I'm going to die. 2 to 8 years is a typical lifespan.
Yeah.
At least that's what my
and that was how many years ago?
That was back in 2016. So she called in my dad. We told my dad while I was crying and she's crying. And I think it was the first time I've ever seen my dad go to cry. And he quickly grabbed a tool and went out to the back patio and tried to find something to do so that he could hide the fact that he was crying. It was the first Christmas that I absolutely hated. The neurologist couldn't have done more harm in that moment. And for the next few months, I was suicidal, extremely depressed. And it was during that time that my speech started to deteriorate, possibly because of the depression, as well as everything else. So I sought out a support group of anybody that could help.
Yeah.
And it so happened I found the Lewy Body Support Group, and I looked up what Lewy is.
Right in the States?
What's that?
Was it right in the States, United States?
Yes, it was right in the United States, but it was on Facebook, and it was very small at the time. It was only 20 people. Now we're like 3,000 people. About 20 people, and before I tried to join, I looked up what is Lewy body, and I said, well, autonomic. Okay, my heart just had this issue. Wait, REM behavior sleep. I have REM behavior. So it was like, okay. So I said, I don't know if I have this, but I know I have a dementia. Can I please join? I need someplace. And they were kind enough to say yes.
No, that's wonderful.
So that was my first start of finding support.
Yeah. So do you think if I know the way the neurologist hung up on you was very bad.
Yeah.
Because I feel as clinicians we need to do more. You know, you just don't end at a diagnosis and say, oh, you have dementia. Let's catch up again in 6 months. We'll figure out what to say. I think there is need of them being able to communicate what that diagnosis means and what you could do about it in the meantime as you're waiting for the 3 months to catch up with them. And also, I think they've done this very well, especially in the HIV space. If, let's say, someone is died, for example, in Zambia, if someone has got a HIV diagnosis, if the doctor doesn't have enough time, they still refer them to a support service that's going to explain what happens next after that particular diagnosis, the support networks that they could access, how do they get the drugs that they are prescribed, how often could they come, do they have support back home? So I think we need more doctors, clinicians to be able to, even if you don't have like enough time to explain, but at least be able to refer to support networks that could explain, or even asking us to just explain and see what happens next.
But when I joined the support group, I learned that there were a lot of people being treated this way.
Wow.
That there were a lot of people being told, get your affairs in order, you're dying, and that's it. 6 months, see you in a year. I was fortunate because I made the decision to return to faith, and I picked the Episcopal Church in that moment because I knew how suicidal my mind was going, and I knew that faith was one of those areas that can give you a reason to live. So I went to one church and asked them, well, how do you handle diversity? I didn't want to just come out and say, are you gay friendly? And he said, I think you're speaking about homosexuality. And when he used a medical term, I said, ooh, you're not friendly. But again, an angel outside, a man I would never see again, he says, when I walk out the door, he says, I think you want St. George's down the street, which was another Episcopal church. And so I got home, I was in tears, and I called St. George's. It was a Sunday, and nobody was going to pick up because it was church day. And I was like, my name is John Richard Pagan, and I'm gay. And if you guys can't handle it, then you're the wrong place for me.
Oh, wow.
I need help. The following day, a priest called me. Her name was Ray. Her name was Gay Ray. Gay Ray. But definitely her first name was Gay. And that was where she started out with. She goes, not only do we love gays, my name is even gay.
Oh,
and she
was it like Martin Gay?
It was beautiful. I mean, it was just this, and she just laughed with it, and she made me realize that I was okay, and I landed up joining that church. That's the first time I became an Episcopalian. Was there? That's what would lead me to decide to join a monastic community, because they made it so natural.
Yeah.
And accepting. I still didn't want to be a burden to my parents, so I didn't want to go and stay home. I wanted to stay in my own place.
Yeah.
My parents decided it was time for me to move in with them 18 months later, because I wasn't eating well, and I would start to get confused on how my recipes go, and the stove would get overwhelming, and then lightning storms would happen, and I'd get jumpy because I'm in a house alone, and my anxiety would just jump through the roof.
Mm.
And that's when my parents decided that I needed to move home.
So I know you found the Lewy body group on Facebook. You joined the Georgia Episcopal Church.
I joined St. George's
Saint-
Episcopal Church in Fredericksburg.
Did you have like any LGBTQ support group for people living with dementia?
No, but I would sort of kind of create one.
Do you have one now?
I have LGBTQ friends in different dementia support groups, and we have become very close and supportive of one another. Now I'm part of one that's in another county further down toward DC, but I'm a part of it and I absolutely love it. But the Lewy body support group was still very small. They would get to know me and they would actually hear my symptoms and they would start to say, you need to research this more. I think you chose this dementia for a reason. A lot of your symptoms are
you didn't get to choose.
really absolutely there. But I couldn't get a neurologist at the VA to take me seriously. I was too young to have Lewy body. I should just wait until the dementia has stronger symptoms and then see what happens.
Do you feel like we have a lot of young people that would end up having dementia and not seek help because of
stigma?
Yeah.
It's not uncommon in my support group because now I'm a moderator for the Lewy body support group. And like I said before, we're like 3,000 strong now. And we get young people all the time in their 30s and 40s who have done everything to hide their diagnosis. They fought and they didn't want to go to a doctor because they didn't want to risk losing their job. They didn't want to risk not being able to provide for their family. They didn't know how this would affect their kids. And I don't judge. I look at those fears and I say they're real. They're real fears, and they had every right to feel them. But I also spoke up about how this had to change. And I saw companies found out that there was a deficit somewhere, and they did everything in their power to get them to quit, or they just let them go and said, you're failing at your tasks. And sometimes they did it after they knew that there was a diagnosis. And they did it because then they didn't have to pay for Social Security disability. It's an income for people who are disabled sometimes in the U.S. So the system makes it a bigger problem. Because if that happens, if the job is allowed to let you go for any reason, you lose a job before you file for Social Security disability, then you may not qualify for Social Security disability.
So you have to
harder.
be employed to qualify for.
You have to have worked so many hours in a set amount of time. In fact, because I worked a coffee shop and then I was in school all the time, I didn't qualify for Social Security disability. But I did qualify for my VA disability before, so I still had that. My fear was a totally different one because my VA disability was for another disability that was related to my military time. And if they find out that you have dementia, they could take your disability away from you. And that was scary. Your battery's low?
Yeah, but it's all right. It's still recording.
Okay. So that was the scary part for me. But in all of this, I'm the one who took the.
It's all right. The time is.
No, it's that the picture's not moving.
Yeah, it is. So it's dragging a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
The thing is that through the whole process, I kept good notes. I kept track of all my health issues, and they started to grow. And when neurologists wouldn't give me answers, I'd fire them. I'd let them go. This neurologist who hung up on me, I wrote a letter to the VA and said I would never go back to him. And I told them why. And he still won't get into the elevator if I'm in the elevator. He avoids me like a plague. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I took all of my records to a Parkinson's specialist in the VA system, who was the chief of the Parkinson's clinic, and said, can you look at this and tell me if I have Lewy body? She didn't know what Lewy body was, but she said, I'll read up on it and I'll see if I can help you. And she was the first person to do that. And after reading up and really looking into it, she started running some additional tests. She pulled up all my records to show all my health issues. And she said, I think you either have Lewy body or you have multiple system atrophy. She was concerned about all the autonomic dysfunctions I have because I have a lot of them. And that's understandable as I grew to understand the different diseases. But when she finally said, okay, I think it might be Lewy body, she wouldn't give me a diagnosis yet. She said it might be Lewy body. And I kept trying to tell her, you can say probable or you can say possible. Nobody can know until there's an autopsy. So it's okay to say one of those words. And she just wouldn't. She would say, well, you might have it, but she wouldn't say either of those words. So she's like, I want to send you to a civilian, a specialist who deals with certain mobility conditions. And she sent me to Dr. Rogers, who I still see today. He started out with ageism by saying I was too young. And after I had a long talk with him and said that I won't accept ageism from my doctors and got an apology from him, then he became one of my absolute best doctor. He not only diagnosed me, and he diagnosed me that because it's a weird form of Lewy body, I don't have Parkinson's features as much as I have what's called cerebellum ataxia, which you might have seen more in MSA, but not as often in Lewy body. But he's handled all my treatment since. He's the one I trusted my mother with when my mother started having memory problems. He's the one who says, what you need is a speech therapist to help you work through word finding and things. I'm like, they do that? He was the first doctor to say there were alternatives, that I didn't have to sit and wait. And I was becoming more and more popular in the Lewy body support group. So I started helping other people who came in and were upset and didn't know who to talk to. And those people started getting help. And we would tell them, talk to your doctor about this medication. Talk to your doctor about this test. More people were getting diagnosed correctly and they were getting the right medications that were finally improving their symptoms. And there was an incredible amount of thanks. And it was from them that I suddenly found myself being an advocate for a conference. And I was like, well, I've never done this.
What is it? How do I go about it?
I was an adult teacher for 6 months. I've talked in front of classrooms, but they had like 6 to 8 people in them. What do I do? And they told me I do the same thing. So actually, in some of my I actually sit on a desk or I sit on the table and I sit there and I say, I'm getting comfortable. And I learned that it's okay to speak from the heart. When the Mayo Clinic, which is a research clinic in Michigan, they invited me out to speak to a bunch of neurologists, and I sat and I said, "Ooh, what am I going to do? What am I going to say?" And then I took a deep breath and I said, "You know what? You're all living on your egos. Get out of those egos and start realizing you've got people in front of you." And I just said it. And to have neurologists come up to you afterwards and say, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." I mean, that was important.
True.
Watching the small changes happen told me that this was a powerful moment for me and that I needed to continue to speak up. I advocated for myself first, and then I just started advocating for others.
You've been brilliant. I think first time I heard of you was when we started the fellowship, so I could hear Professor Irasima talking about the PPI panel. Then I was like, oh, what's PPI? Because where I come from, recent people with lived experience on research programs. I was like, oh, okay, that's new. We jumped on the call and they introduced me. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Then I think actually just hearing you contribute and giving feedback on what we thought about particular questions or about our pilot projects has been very impactful, because now after I think our first encounter online, I know I've never told you this. We had gone for leadership retreat in Limerick. No, it should be the southern part of Dublin. Yeah. So we were there for a week. So we went to university and we met another wonderful person there, Rose Galvin. She runs Age Research Center.
Okay.
And they're the PPI panel. So, and I was like, I'm coming back for that, have an online experience, then I'll come back for the physical experience. And it was wonderful to just hear people actually contribute to research, ask questions.